Like I said, I didn't even know what an acid attack was. Anju came to us. Her face was, because of the burns, her face was attached to her neck. 10 years, and I'm still sitting here, and still every single year to get by is so difficult. Most NGOs in India can attest to the fact that, unless you're joined with a massive corporate, which, but unfortunately, most corporates choose to allocate that to their own projects that will benefit them in the future.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Rising Tides, where we talk with the change makers, the people who are making a strong impact on this society. With me, Anju. Today, we are going to speak with the founder of Make Love, Not Scars, an NGO working towards helping acid attack survivors. She's constantly working towards raising awareness through different campaigns. Let's welcome Ms. Ria Sharma. So, Ria, the first question that I have for you is that let's start with the what led to the foundation of Make Love Not Scars, and in what capacity is the NGO working today?
All right. So, Make Love Not Scars is an NGO that works in all aspects of rehabilitation for acid attack survivors pan India. We have also helped some cases internationally, but let's start right from the beginning about how this came into being. So, I was studying fashion at the Leeds College of Art in the UK, and I wasn't doing well. It definitely wasn't my passion. But I was passing, which was a good thing. And I finally made it to my third and final year, in which we had a little bit more flexibility to explore other subjects that interested us. And in my third year, I realized that I was really inspired by the women's movement that was happening in India at the time after the Nirbhaya gang rape. And I decided that I wanted to kind of explore that more and be a part of that in any capacity. So I started trying to figure out ways in which I could be a part of it. And one night when I was sitting in my bedroom, I stumbled across a picture of an acid attack survivor. And in this picture, the acid attack survivor was holding up her hand against her face. And just the juxtaposition of her hand being completely unharmed and her face having, of course, these drastic burns, I think is something that really stuck with me. And at that moment, I thought that this woman had maybe, been set on fire. Maybe it was a dowry case. I didn't actually know what an acid attack was. So when I started reading up more about it, it really bothered me that the simple act of throwing liquid on someone can cause so much lasting damage. It just didn't make sense how something so that simple act could ruin someone's life forever. And I decided that I wanted to explore this subject more. So I remember going to my professor and telling her, I stumbled across this picture of an acid attack survivor, and I kept saying to her, but it's not fashion, it's not a part of my degree. And she was very supportive, and she said, anything is fashion. I mean, fashion is the first way that people view you, and it's what that makes them feel. And of course, an acid attack is a part of identity and how people view themselves and how the world views them and the stigma around it. So she said, we can make it happen. So I remember she let me borrow a video camera from the college at that point. This was in 2014. And she said, go back to India, and start shooting a documentary on the subject. And, I was clueless at that time. I'd lived a very sheltered life. Like I said, I didn't even know what an acid attack was. So it was almost like she pushed me into this world. So I came back to India, and I started meeting with survivors. And up until this point, yes, I was only shooting a documentary. But I think when things changed were when I was visiting one survivor in Bangalore, and she was in the government hospital burns unit. And I just remember that that was one of the most horrific and traumatizing experiences of my life. And up until that point, I had not witnessed misery and human suffering on this scale. I'd never been born witness to it. And when I saw that there were so many women that were not getting help, when I was told by the counselor that, a lot of these women would die because they don't have access to proper medication, basically because of preventable, reasons, um, just the idea of the documentary at that point, it didn't sit well with me, because as much as I do believe that online advocacy and spreading awareness on a cause is important, and I do believe that that's a huge part of why we're able to eradicate some of the social stigma that is attached to disfigurement. I also knew that in that moment, just a documentary would not bring immediate help on the ground. I knew that it would not save the life of the woman that I was there to meet. And that question in itself kind of led me down this path. And, I remember calling up my professor, because we used to have online check ins at that point. And I said, okay, I'm not going to come back. The initial plan was just to be here for a month. And I said, I'm going to stay here till graduation. And, I want to help these women, and I'm going to start an organization. And yeah, coming from a 25, 21-year-old, even my parents were like, okay, how much can you do? Okay, fine, it's good. And whatever. But yeah, I had no experience, and no one in my family had that kind of background. So yeah, it was definitely very difficult to find guidance. I feel like I faced a lot of ageism, definitely sexism, but ageism more, surprisingly. Whenever I'd walk into, let's say, a doctor's office and, try and get them to give survivors subsidized treatment, they would just not take me seriously. So after a point, I started taking all my meetings over the phone for for a brief period of time. I think it was like a year and a half, where I
Mm,
would take all my meetings on the phone, and I'd be like, okay, if they don't see me, then they can't, feel like they can walk all over me.
mm,
So I started doing that for a while, and then we started establishing ourselves. I remember we started getting funding. We started helping a lot of survivors, and we also started getting a lot of publicity, which also helped with our credibility. And then I started showing up to meetings, and then no one said anything. So it was good. It was a process. And for you, for people to take you seriously, especially people that are already established in their own fields, I feel like you need to have a body of work to show them. And that's something I completely understand now. Maybe back then I didn't understand it. But yeah, so that's what we do now. Um, and we're going strong. So yeah, that's a little bit about what we do. I mean, how we started and what we kind of do exactly is that we try to be that one stop shop for everything acid attacks related. Tomorrow, if an acid attack survivor knocks at my door, I want to ensure that I can help her in any and every aspect that she might need help in. So of course, over the years, we have gained significant experience, and of course the medical aspect of it. So be it facilitating life-saving and function-saving treatment, to funding specialized procedures to save vision in the eyes, all the way to helping them obtain their government compensation, fight for justice. And as of COVID, we realized that a lot of these women were not being able to put food on the table, and a lot of these women
mm,
were also attacked predominantly by their own husbands. And they had little kids, which meant that the husband was, of course, either in jail or absconding. The mother was dealing with numerous surgeries on a very long path to recovery. And the children were the ones that were suffering. So, in a bid to also put an end to generational trauma, um, we started funding the education of these children as well, that were impacted by their mother's acid attacks. So currently, we're funding the education of 14 children as well that are under our care. And we're just hoping that these children that have seen trauma do not, go on to cause any sort of trauma. And we found that the solution and, the only way to do that is through education. So that's something that we do offer for the survivors that have children. We also provide a monthly ration stipend to the survivors that are in need of it, so that they can put food on the table and so that they can fully focus on their recovery. Once they have recovered, we also help them with skill and vocational training, or help them continue any sort of education that was left midway because of the attack, and then help them find employment opportunities. So we try to kind of come a full circle when it comes to acid attacks, and we believe in holistic recovery program for each survivor.
Wonderful. Amazing.
Thank
So
you.
from fashion to acid attack survivors. It's been 10
To be
years
fair, I
now.
was never, yeah.
So it's been 10
Sorry,
years
I'm
now.
saying,
Yes, yes.
yeah,
You were
10
saying
years.
something. Please continue.
Sorry, I was saying, to be fair, I was never good at fashion. So, this is something that comes more naturally to me.
Of course, and we should follow it, whatever comes in, whatever calling we get from inside, from our heart and our soul. That is something that if we follow, then we are actually at peace at that time.
Definitely. I 100% agree.
All right. So, how you covered a lot of points with the first question that I asked you. To be a little
Mm.
more specific, if you could share any experience where we can explain how it made a difference in the life of acid attack survivors.
I mean, we help, multiple acid attack survivors a
Mm,
year. So I mean, I couldn't just pick one, but okay, fine. I'll tell you the story about one of the survivors that we recently worked with. So her name is Anju, and Anju was attacked by her husband, and she's from Mathura, and she was attacked. She has three little children. Sorry, I should
mm,
put that in there. She has three little children, and she was attacked by her husband in front of her children. In fact, it was her two little boys that went and got help and dragged her out of the house and got her to the hospital. So these children have not only seen the attack, but they have also spent majority of their younger years, their formative years, in hospitals caring for their mother, and that
mm.
leaves a massive impact. I mean,
Right.
till date, I know that if my mother is unwell, I know what that does to me. So imagine having to spend 5, 6 years of your childhood just going to multiple hospitals. Anyway, when Anju came to us, her face was, because of the burns, her face was attached to her neck. So there was a deep contracture because of which she could not look up or look sideways. And over the past 3 years, we have been able to get her significant medical intervention, which has helped her in her mobility, because of which she eventually went on to find employment. Now, because she is natively from Mathura, she was not, and the job was in Delhi. She was not able to make ends meet. Another thing I forgot to mention is that we run a rehab center for acid attack survivors in Delhi,
Mm,
where survivors can recover from their procedures. And we also use it as a halfway home for survivors that are trying to escape abusive, backgrounds, and also trying to move forward in life. So Anju came and lived with us at the center, of course, during her procedures and after them. But then she came and lived with us while she was employed in Delhi. It gave her time to save up funds so that she could rent a house of her own one day. And she eventually did. After 6 months, she, sorry, I do apologize. Um, After 6 months, she had saved enough money to rent a place of her own. And then her daughter came and started living with her. And we funded the education of the two boys who were in boarding school at the time. And that gave her the opportunity to actually pursue a career, focus on her own recovery, and at the same time not be burdened or worried about her children and how she was going to be able to put food on the table. So I think that's a very good example of, kind of reaching the end of a complete rehabilitational cycle with the survivors.
right. So, follow up are two more questions. One thing is that, of
Yeah.
course, for all this, we require a lot of funds. So how are you
Oh,
going by it with the funds? And second question that I have is, I'll just put it forward so that you can answer together. We're talking about acid attack survivors. On the
Yes.
same side, we do have the
Mhm.
burn survivors as well. They're
Yeah.
very closely related, but they are still different. And
Yes.
the right, so can we talk more about
Okay.
it?
So I'll first start with the acid and burn question. So that, that is extremely relevant. When we, so, unfortunately and fortunately, the bylaws of our specific NGO state that we cannot help someone if the wounds are either self-inflicted
Hmm.
or if they are accidental, right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
we work in the space of gender based violence, so that would come under domestic violence and violence inflicted upon women. So what was happening for a very long period of time is that with an acid attack, it a cannot really be accidental,
Hmm.
and b, no one really, it's not someone's chosen way of trying to commit suicide is throwing acid on yourself, because it's not really going to garner those results. Whereas, on the other hand, there had been multiple cases where women had lit themselves on fire, right? And burns are something that could be passed off as something that was accidental. So whenever we would approach burn survivors, they were reluctant to register any cases because of the involvement of a family member, and B, they would always finally succumb to familial pressure, and they
Hmm.
would say that it was an accident. So we were finding it very hard to help them in general. But I'm happy to say that as of the past 2 years, we have expanded into burns. And if there are, I mean, we're currently dealing with about two survivors that were burnt by their in laws.
Hmm.
And we do currently help burn survivors. It's just that if for us as an NGO, it's very important to make that distinction that we work with women that have been abused.
Hmm.
So we do help burn survivors, but we predominantly have acid attack cases, and we would love to help more burn survivors if they would, come forward. And that's the unfortunate situation right
The
now.
legal part has to be there
Whereas
in that, where the and
it
a
has
complaint has to
to,
be filed, and everything has
yes,
to go by the laws. Then you will be able to help a burn survivor as well. But in
yes,
case of an acid attack, as it is already clear that it cannot be
yes.
self-inflicted, so you are directly able to help them ASAP.
Exactly. 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 So that's a little bit about that. And now coming to funding. So even though it's hard, it's hard. Even though we've been in the field for 10 years, I always thought that at some point the funding would get easier. I thought the more credibility we have, the more, I always thought, okay, fine, if maybe if I give one more interview, one more talk, and by doing all this, it's been 10 years and I'm still sitting here, and still every single year to get by is so, so difficult. Because when you do get funding, we've had, I mean, we've had some great funders, I will say that. But at the same time, we've also had reputed companies that have given us like a sort of, absurd tied up funding, is what I call it. So tied up funding is when they give you the money, but you can only spend it on X. So tomorrow, if I have an emergency case, right? Even though I have, X amount of funds lying in my account, I can't use those for that case because they're tied up in either education or, in skill training or something
Hmm.
else. So I mean, funding is definitely very hard. Currently, we do rely a lot on crowdfunding.
Okay.
Unfortunately, that's something that has not changed. So we do rely on crowdfunding. We have one or two, I mean, we have one corporate funder that, gives us some funding every year. And then we have two corporate donors that are more ad hoc. So they'll come in when we need something specific, and their funding is not guaranteed. And then we also reach out to our personal networks and try and approach people with personal wealth to donate to the cause. But yeah, we just work on people's good graces, predominantly crowdfunding, and that's how we try to make things and make ends meet. But I'll tell you one thing: every single year is a massive struggle, and I think most NGOs in this space can say that, not even in this space, just most NGOs in India can attest to the fact that, unless you're joined with a massive corporate, which, and these big corporates don't normally fund NGOs like mine, right? Like, for example, a Pepsi, a Coke. I remember they only fund projects around their factories so that it brings them more employment in the future. So that's their CSR. So you would think that there is a lot of money in CSR, but unfortunately, most corporates choose to allocate that to their own projects that will benefit them in the future, which is very sad. But that is an unfortunate situation.
So CSR was the only hope, and that
It was,
clearly is misused.
it's extremely misused. And, I can see that because it's not been 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. I've been
It's
begging
been
for
10
money for
years.
10 years now.
Right.
And, I wish I could have said that the situation has improved, but it's not. I mean, NGOs like mine, with all this, publicity over the past 10 years, I mean, you give the NGO a quick search, there's a massive body of work on the internet, and that's because we are run by a team of young people. And, we do concentrate on our social medias and pushing the message out there through all those mediums. So it's not like we don't have a presence, we have a presence. But even after having that presence, we have to constantly fight, beg, run after people. It's like you're constantly begging people for money. And yeah, it's not a great feeling. And but you keep telling yourself that you're doing it for a good cause, you're doing it for a good cause. And I'm just hoping that there comes a day where I don't have to send WhatsApp messages to my personal friends every like once a year and say, please, can you donate? Please, can you donate? We've reached that point where we've even exhausted our personal networks. And how many times can you ask someone? And
Right.
I just wish that the situation was different. But unfortunately, this is what it is. And we keep doing it for as long as we have to do it. But I just wish, CSR was something that wasn't so misused, because it's a lot of money. It could go to the right places.
I hope the message reaches out to the right people as well. With that, Ria,
Yeah,
would
so
you
do I.
have a message for our audience?
I would just say, like, try and, we don't realize, and this is something that, recently I've been trying to get everyone to do. And that is just, when you see someone, just make sure you make more of an effort to like smile and greet people. I know it's like a very small thing, but like, for example, when I see the guard downstairs, or, if I see someone that basically works, in a restaurant, I'll always make sure like I ask them about their day and just be like, hi, how are you? And it really puts a smile to someone's face who might be having a bad time, or doesn't have the same life and privileges as you. So even a small act of kindness can go a really long way. I'm not saying you have to donate to an NGO, because I'm sure people are sick of hearing of it. So whatever you can do in your own little capacity to make someone's life and day better, like, why not? It's not going to cost you anything.
All right, Ria. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking out time for us today. We hope the video reaches out to the right people. We genuinely hope that some people do connect with you, right?
Yeah.
And of course, in terms of donation, we're talking about. For reference, it's Make Love,
Yeah.
Not Scars. Anyone can reach out, we can search and definitely try and help you with it. You're doing a great job. Continue doing it.
And,
And hope is something that we have to rely on every day, every single day, right? Thank you.
definitely. Thank you. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
having me and giving me a platform. It was great talking to you.
Same area. Thank you so much. Have a great evening
Thank
ahead. Bye
you.
bye.
Bye. You too. See you.